Chapter 19 and 20, The Sign of the Beaver. Grandmother say you come to village today, Etienne announced 2 days later. That's kind of her, Matt answered, but my hand is just about healed. It doesn't need any more medicine. Not for medicine. Matt waited uncertainly. My grandmother very surprised white boy go a long way for Indian dog, Etienne explained. She say you welcome. So once again, Matt crossed the river to the Indian stockade. This time, though the dogs barked at him and children stared and giggled, he did not feel so much like a stranger. Saknus held out a hand of welcome. Etienne's grandmother did not exactly smile, but her thin lips were less grim. Behind her, Etienne's sister smiled, but did not speak. The old woman dipped a clamshell ladle into a kettle and filled 3 bowls with a stew of fish and corn, then drew back while Etienne and Saknus and Matt ate their meal in silence. Neither she nor Marie ate till the men were finished. After the meal, Etienne did not hurry him away. He rather grandly played host and led Matt around the village. He amused Matt. He was amused when Matt kept stopping every few feet to watch what the women were doing. Matt was filled with curiosity. He knew well enough that Etienne was scornful of the squaw work the white boy had to do, but Etienne did not have to worry about what he was going to eat the next day. There were so many things Matt wanted to learn. He observed carefully as 2 women pounded dried kernels of corn between 2 round stones, catching the coarse flour on a strip of birch bark. He marked how they spread berries on bark so that the sun dried them hard as pebbles. He admired the baskets made of a single strip of birch bark, bent and fastened at the corners so tightly that water can be boiled inside. I must remember that, he resolved. I could do that myself if I tried. For a time, Etienne good-naturedly answered his questions. Finally, he grew impatient of squaw work. He led Matt toward a cluster of boys who squatted in a circle in the dirt pathway, absorbed in some noisy game. The boys widened their ring to make room for 2 more, and Matt crouched awkwardly on his heels to watch them. One after the other, they were shaking 6 smooth-boned discs in a wooden bowl and tossing them onto the ground. Each disc was marked on one side with a band of red paint. When each boy had a turn, the one who had thrown the most discs to land painted side up was proclaimed the winner, and with much gloating he collected from the others a number of small sticks. Then they handed the bowl to Matt. His luck was good. 5 discs showed red bands, and with laughter and clowning the others piled up before him a heap of sticks. What was so exciting about this simple game, he wondered, to cause so much shouting? The bowl went rapidly around the circle, the sticks kept changing hands, and presently he had the answer. One of the boys had no sticks left to pay. With a mocking groan, he unclasped from his arm a wide copper band and tossed it to the winner. So that's it, Matt thought silently. Sooner or later I'm bound to lose too, and when I do, what will they expect me to forfeit? He did not have long to wait. At his next turn, every one of his discs landed blank side up. Ruefully, he handed over the last of the sticks he had won. There was a gleeful shout, and then they waited. What do I have, he thought desperately. Nothing in his pocket but a jackknife, and his very life depended upon that knife. Then the boy nearest him reached over and jerked roughly at the sleeve of his shirt. Matt pretended not to understand, and then the boy tugged harder. 2 of them got to their feet, plainly ready to tear the shirt from his back. Etienne made no move to help him. Grimly, he pulled the shirt over his head and tossed it to the winner. It served him right, he supposed. His father had always forbidden him to gamble. But what was he going to do without that shirt? It was the only one he had. Now Etienne had to put an end to the game. He leapt to his feet and produced from nowhere a softball made of deerskin. Instantly, the others raced off in all directions and came back carrying thin sticks. One of these was thrust at Matt. It was a curious sort of bat, light and flexible, with a wide, flat curve at the tip. Forgetting his humiliation, Matt suddenly grinned. With a bat in his hands, he could hold his own against any Indian. The boys back in Quincy would have told him that. Eagerly, he joined in a scramble of choosing sides. But never had he played a game like this, so fast and merciless. The ball could not be touched by hand or foot. It was kept flying through the air by the sticks, alone. If it fell to the ground, some player scooped it up with the tip of his bat and sent it spinning again. The Indian boys were bewilderingly quick and skillful, and wielded their bats with no heed for each other's heads, and certainly not for Matt's. It was no accident, he knew, when an elbow jabbed suddenly into his right eye. These boys were putting him to the test. Ignoring the blows that fell on his head and shoulders, Matt swung grimly at the whirling ball, missing it over and over, but sometimes feeling the satisfying thwack of bat against leather. He was thankful now that he had no shirt. If he'd only been wearing a breechcloth instead of tight English breeches. But there was no time to worry about his clothes. Finally, by pure luck, he sent the ball into the hole in the ground that marked the goal. Out of breath and dripping, he grinned at his side, generously cheered him, and whacked his sore shoulders. Then, with a whoop, they all raced together through the stockade gate down to the river and went leaping like frogs into the water. Matt floated face down, grateful for the coolness against his burning cheeks. All at once, a brown arm circled his neck and dragged him under. Squirming free, he seized that black head in both hands, and the two boys went down together. They came up gasping and grinning. Suddenly, Matt was enjoying himself. It was almost as good as being back in Quincy again. The sun had reached the tops of the pines when he went to Atienne's cabin to bid the grandmother goodbye. She stood studying him, and he flushed under her sharp eyes. He must look a sight. He knew there was a lump as big as an egg on his forehead. His right eye was probably turning black. She turned and spoke a few stern words to Atienne. With a shrug, he went out and returned in a few minutes carrying Matt's shirt. "They played a trick on you," he said. "Joke." "Some joke," Matt retorted. He wanted to refuse the shirt, but he couldn't afford to be proud about his only shirt. Resentfully, he pulled it over his head. Before they left, the old woman gave each of them a slab of cake heavy with nuts and berries. Her eyes, as she looked at her grandson, were warm and bright. Matt was minded how his mother had often looked at him, pretending to be angry with him, but not able to hide the fact that she was mighty fond of him at the same time. Suddenly he felt a sharp stab of homesickness. Outside the cabin, Atienne's dog was waiting. He limped after them to the river, and when Matt stepped into the canoe, the dog jumped in after him and settled only a few inches from Matt's knees. He had never willingly come that close before. Atienne noticed and commented, "Dog remember." Was that possible? Matt wondered. Could a dog caught in a trap, even though he snapped out in pain and fear, sense that somebody was trying to help him? Could the dog remember that terrible ordeal at all? He couldn't read a dog's mind, but just possibly a dog could read a white boy's mind. Very slowly, Matt reached down and laid his hand on the dog's back. The dog did not stir or growl. Gently, Matt scratched behind the ragged ear. Gradually, against the bottom of the canoe, the thin tail began to thump in a contented rhythm. At the opposite bank, Atienne watched Matt climb out of the canoe, but he did not follow. Apparently, this was as far as he intended to go. As Matt hesitated, he lifted his hand. It occurred to Matt that this might be a compliment. Without saying a word, Atienne was acknowledging that Matt could find his own way through the forest. Returning his wave, Matt set out with confidence that he did not quite feel. It was growing dark. He would have to walk fast or he would not be able to mark the signs along the trail. He was very tired. The bump on his forehead was throbbing. He was sore from head to toe, and his eye was almost swollen shut. But to his surprise, deep inside, he felt content. Was it because Atienne's dog had finally trusted him? No, more than that had changed. He had passed some sort of test. Not by any means with blank colors. He had plenty of bruises to remind him of that, but at least he had not disgraced Atienne. He felt satisfied. And for the first time since his father had left him, he did not feel alone in the forest. Chapter 20. For the next few days, Matt waited eagerly. Early in the morning, he finished his chores so that at a word from Etienne, he would be ready to set out for the Indian village again. But Etienne did not come. Matt resolved to be patient, but day by day, his new confidence began to slide away. Perhaps he had only imagined that he had passed the test. In Etienne's eyes, maybe he failed. It was a week before Etienne came, and the moment Matt saw him, he knew there would be no invitation. The Indian boy was solemn and unsmiling, looking more like his grandfather than ever before. He stared at the book Matt opened, his mind plainly miles away. He did not want to listen to a story. He seemed to have forgotten the words he had learned the week before. "I not remember," he said impatiently. "My grandfather teach me many things." "What sorts of things?" "Time to hunt come soon," he said finally. Matt felt suddenly hopeful. Perhaps it was not any failure of his own that had caused Etienne to stay away. Every year, Etienne told him, when the leaves had fallen for the trees, the Indian hunted the caribou and the great moose. Whole families moved away from the village to follow the trail of the big animals. Matt knew more than anything in the world Etienne longed to hunt with the men. He could imagine how Etienne must have been staying close to his grandfather these last days, trying to be useful and prove that he was fit to be one of them. "I not come tomorrow," Etienne added. "Maybe long time." "You going on the hunt?" Matt tried hard to keep the envy out of his voice. Etienne shook his head. "I go to find my Manitou." Matt was puzzled. Was Manitou another word for moose? "Maybe you call it spirit," Etienne explained. "All Indian boy must have a Manitou. It's time for me." How can he find a spirit? For a moment, Matt thought this was one of Etienne's odd jokes, but he had never seen his friend so serious, even troubled. "My grandfather teach me," Etienne repeated. "Manitou come in dream." Then, seeing that Matt was not laughing, that he really wanted to understand, Etienne went on, trying to explain in his clumsy English a mystery that cannot truly be explained at all. "Every Indian boy must have a Manitou," he said. "Before he could take his place as one of the men of his family, he had to find it for himself. No one could help him. His grandfather had been training him for many days. He had to learn many things. Now he must make the test. He would go out into the forest alone. First, he would make a special preparation, bathe himself carefully, and take a special medicine to help him clean the inside out. Then he would go far into the forest and build himself a wigwam of branches. He would stay there alone for many days. He would not eat anything at all, even berries. After sundown, he would drink a little water from a brook. He would sing the songs that his grandfather had taught him and repeat the ancient prayers of his people so this heart would be worthy. If he did all this, if he waited faithfully, one day his Manitou would come to him. Then he would go back to the village. He would have a new name, and he would become a man and a hunter." "What would it be like, this Manitou?" Matt questioned. There was no way to know, Etienne told him. "It could come in many ways. In a dream, he might see a bird or an animal, or even a tree. He might not see anything at all. Instead, he might hear a voice speaking to him. There would be no mistake. When it came, Etienne would recognize what was meant for him. What if the Manitou should not come? Instantly, Matt was ashamed of his question. A dark shadow had crossed Etienne's face. There was something in his eyes that Matt had never seen before. Sadness and, more than that, fear. "I wait," Etienne said, "till he come. I can never be hunter." Matt could think of nothing at all to say. He felt shut away from his friend in a way that even the boy's scorn had never made him feel. It was something he could not understand or share. If he finds his Manitou, he thought, he will go with the men. He may never come here again. "You'll come back afterwards, won't you?" he asked anxiously, though he knew in his heart that it would never be the same. "I come back," Etienne promised. Waking in the nights that followed, Matt pulled the blanket tighter about his shoulders. It must be very cold in the forest. He could not get Etienne out of his mind. What would it be like sitting in a shelter, just waiting, growing hungrier every day and more afraid? Because there was no doubt Etienne had been afraid. Matt was sure of that. Etienne was afraid he might fail, that he might have to return to the village and admit that his Manitou had not appeared. For Etienne, this would be a disgrace, a shame that must be terrible if the thought of it had brought fear to his eyes. Even though he dreaded that it would mean the end of their adventure, Matt hoped that Etienne would find his Manitou. It's the end of chapters 19 and 20.